And good evening and welcome to Newsmax Prime. I'm Miranda Kahn in for JD Hayworth. Great to have you with us. Of prime interest tonight as pundits on both sides of the aisle debate the root cause of that terror attack in Orlando and what needs to happen next. Donald Trump makes it clear where he stands.
I just watched President Obama and he does it a lot. He does it a lot because we have one after another. We have tragedy after tragedy, and it's a tough situation. But he's largely, to a large extent, he's blaming guns, and I'm going to save your Second Amendment, folks. I'm going to save your Second Amendment. Totally. And Hillary wants to abolish the Second Amendment. Remember that.
And now for this quick reminder, we will be taking your calls for the next hour. The number to call is right there on your screen. It's 1-877-NEWSMAX. Again, that's 1-877-639-7629. Call in with a short question or comment and we'll put you live on the air. Now, for much more on this story, we are pleased to be joined by our panel. First, Skyping in from Atlanta, Georgia, the co-founder of the Women Vote Trump PAC, Amy Kremer. Amy is also the former chairman of the Tea Party Express. And from Newsmax, New York, radio and TV commentator Ellis Henican. Thank you both for joining us here on Newsmax Prime on this Friday.
For having me.
Hey, Miranda.
Now, earlier today, Hillary Clinton took to Twitter pushing for gun control once again. Take a look at what she had to say. She tweeted, 1 year ago, we lost 9 lives in Charleston, 49 in Orlando on Sunday, 26 in Newtown, too many others. This has to stop. We need a change. Now, as you heard earlier, Donald Trump believes that President Hillary will be the end of the Second Amendment. Amy, will a President Hillary mean the end of the Second Amendment?
Well, it certainly seems like that every time there's some tragedy, they want to push gun control. And, you know, I would not doubt it if they try to get rid of the Second Amendment. I don't think it'll ever happen, but I do think that they will try, yes.
Ellis, if you ask many Republicans, it's terrorism, not guns, that are to blame for what happened in Orlando. After all, guns were not used during the Boston Marathon bombing. Do they have a valid argument?
Well, clearly, this is the intersection of several tragic things, and the motivations are complex. Terrorism is part of it. Guns are part of it. Mental illness is part of it. And a certain sexual gay bashing element seems to be in here as well. So, you know, crazy people do crazy things for crazy reasons, and it's awful. Often several of them wrapped up together. I think that's what we got in Orlando.
Amy, is this just a debate over gun control and terrorism, or is this Republicans and Democrats playing one of their blame games?
Well, look, I think the truth is, I mean, everybody wants to blame. Anytime there's a tragedy, people want to find somebody to blame. The real question is here, who dropped the ball? When you have the FBI either not investigating, I mean, is it the FBI? Is it the CIA, the NSA? Who exactly is it? But you know what, Miranda? I want this to stop. I absolutely want this to stop. But a big part of this is terrorism. Wasn't that long ago that we had San Bernardino, and then if you look at Brussels and Paris as well, and some of the people responsible for Brussels and Paris were Syrian refugees that snuck through. And I think that is what we need to be focusing on, because in this administration, they wanted to allow 10,000 Syrian refugees. Hillary Clinton, who is the presumptive Democratic nominee, wants to allow 65,000 Syrian refugees, was what she said in November of this past year. If you stop 99% of those Syrian refugees, if you could make sure that there was no terrorism, that still leaves 650 people that could possibly commit terrorist acts. We have this going on right now.
Hold on a second here. This guy is an American citizen. He's not a refugee from anywhere. I mean, that's exactly my point. You're arguing something that is simply not related to the case. Come on.
Citizens. This guy was an American citizen, but look at the wife of the San Bernardino killer. And then, I mean, look at what happened in Brussels and Paris. Is America going to be next? We need to control our border.
Why don't we, if I can interrupt the speech for 1 second?
Sure, go ahead, Ellis.
Why don't we talk about some facts here, right? 12,000 people, let me share a number with you. 12,000 people were murdered by guns last year in America. That rate is 25 times higher than the average of other countries in the developed world. Another 23,000 were paralyzed, maimed, injured, or wounded by handguns. And another 20,000 were killed suicide by guns. I mean, listen, 50 people in Orlando is an absolutely horrible tragedy. But we gotta, as we focus on that, don't we have to give some attention to the idea that 12,000 people murdered last year and probably will be again by gunfire? Can we not do anything about that? Just throw up our hands and say too bad?
Well, you know what? I'd like to bring somebody else into this conversation, guys, somebody who was a Syrian refugee. I'd like to bring in Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Jasser is the president and founder of the American Islamic Forum of Democracy. Dr. Jasser, pleasure to have you here on Newsmax Prime. You're also the author of the book, A Battle of the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. You've been sitting there listening to this debate go on about who to allow into this country. I want you to weigh in on this discussion if you could.
Well, thank you for having me. And, listen, it is important when we use or figure out what the treatment is that we get the diagnosis right. And the diagnosis here is a radical global ideology that infects the minds of citizens, of Muslims, and those who believe in the geopolitical movement of political Islam. And we can't divert this into exploiting it to be used in some political one-upsmanship with the anti-gun lobby, the gun control movement, and other things. That's not going to solve the problem. This problem, the reason it happens, the reason the FBI interviewed this guy twice and then let him go, is currently our entire mantra of countering violent extremism doesn't look at ideology because of political correctness. The reason it's important to name this as radical Islamism is once we would name it as such and then begin to look at the ideas, we would then realize that along with radical Islamism comes ideas such as grotesque homophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-Westernism. Then these ideas can be monitored and the Bureau can be held accountable for people that have and harbor those ideas. It's not about the inanimate objects that they hold in their hands, the guns and the tools. They use pressure cookers, they use knives, they behead people. It has nothing to do with the weapons. It is a global ideology.
I want to ask.
So let's address that.
Go ahead,
Let's
Ellis.
address the ideology there. I mean, that's the easy part. I mean, of course, we all denounce violent Islam, violence from any point. The question is, what's the effective way and the way appropriate to our values in this country to deal with it, right? I mean, one thing we could do is go and bomb across the Middle East. Another is we could turn all Muslims into devils. We could bar them and treat them like garbage in our society. I would argue, what I think most reasonable advocates argue, is that a more nuanced approach is better. Fight the people at war where you have to. Don't treat the religion as some kind of a horrible faith, and try and find a way to win the hearts and the minds of those people whose very minds are at risk. Can't we join together in that instead of?
Let's ask Sandra from Roy,
kind of
Utah, to weigh in on
campaign?
this discussion. Sandra joins us via phone. What's your comment?
Hi, Miranda.
Hi.
My comment is this. America is a lifeboat to the world. But like with any lifeboat, if you overload it, it sinks. The problem isn't the gun. It's the mind behind the gun. And we've proven, it's been shown in Europe and in France, that usually it's not the first generation of refugees that become radicalized. It's the second generation that becomes radicalized. And we need to look at this, and for a time period, I think that we should put a moratorium on all immigration to this country until we can sort things out.
Sandra, thank you so much for weighing in. You bring up a good
Yeah.
point. You know, Trump has been doubling down on his ban, his temporary ban of Muslims into this country. Legal scholars have been arguing on this, saying that it's not possible, that it's illegal to have a religious test. However, we've had people on this show, including Alan Dershowitz, a former Harvard professor, say that it's possible that a President Trump could prevent immigrants coming into this country from countries that are predominantly Muslim in faith. Dr. Jasser, I want you to weigh in on this.
Yeah, that's a very important question, and here's why I agree that you should pause all immigration, but to say that you're just going to pause Muslim immigration, first of all, doesn't work. They could easily lie about their faith. Secondly, when we were talking about nuances a minute ago, and Alan mentioned that, yes, nuance is very important, but what's the nuance? We shouldn't say all Muslims. We should say all Islamists or jihadists. Just as in the Cold War, we were fighting a political ideology. The political movement that we're fighting is a huge one that includes the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, Jamaat Islamiyah, the Khomeinis of Iran. But it's not only Muslims who are a threat. Russians' intelligence, the recent conviction of a Syrian American who was buying oil from ISIS was a Christian American, George Hamawi. So the bottom line is that it's not all only Muslims. Yes, pause all immigration. Why? Because we're not betting against jihadism and Islamism, but our candidates should have a vision of what they see as a doctrine for security, which should be about liberty and freedom, not about faith identity, which feeds into the ISIS narrative. It should be about Muslims who want to be free, separate from Assad, separate from ISIS. Those are our greatest allies, and we've been able in America to fight wars in Vietnam, in World War II, accepting the refugees from war-torn areas where we had people wanting as Trojan horses to come into America, and we were able to vet that. We can do that again.
And Miranda, I just want to say also, we need to get rid of this political correctness, because the fact of the matter is none of us want to go to war, but these radical Islamists want to kill us. They are at war with us, and to act like that is not the case is just an out and outright falsehood. They want to kill us. We saw that on 9/11. We've continued to see it. We've seen it in Europe, and now we saw it in San Bernardino, and now in Orlando. And people need to wake up and stop with the political correctness, because it's killing us.
Well, we heard from Dr.
agree.
Jasser. We heard from Amy Kremer right there talking about political correctness. Ellis, Henican, I want to give you a chance to respond. We're going to ask our panel to stick around. Much more to come. You are watching Newsmax Prime. We'll be right back. And don't forget that number, 1-877-NEWSMAX. We'll be right back.